It's amazing how many doctors and other high-income professional members of our passive investor circle that have never heard of real estate syndications before. And frankly, I hadn't either till I'd say about 7 or 8 years ago. And today it seems that more and more busy professionals, they're actually in search of ways to build passive income streams. And syndications are, in my opinion, one of the best ways out there for the busy professional. So in this video today, I'm going to teach you exactly what is involved with a real estate syndication, how they're structured, and at the end, the exact process for how you can get started in them today. Hi, I'm Dr. Jeff Anzalone, a periodontist and founder of debtfreedr.com. And this channel is all about helping doctors and other high-income professionals grow passive income streams for financial freedom, typically using passive real estate investments. I'm going to give you a quick story. So I had a dentist that practices out in California, and his wife, they recently reached out to me as they had heard me on a podcast. And they had recently sold a commercial building and got a really nice profit for it too. And when they heard me on this podcast, I was actually discussing about syndications and different ways that physicians and dentists could save on taxes. And one of the ways that we discussed about saving on taxes, it's something called a 1031 exchange. And specifically, they were interested in learning more about developing an exit strategy. They wanted to know about if I knew of any potential investment opportunities. They wanted to know if it was possible to 1031 exchange into a syndication. And after talking to them, getting to know them, getting to know their goals, I was actually able to connect them with a deal sponsor that would help them identify up to three possible properties within the certain 45-day time period that's required of a 1031 exchange. Then I was also able to get them in touch with a company that would act as a 1031 intermediary during the process. Basically, these were the middle people or the middleman that you would need for this process. And honestly, thinking about it, 7 or 8 years ago, before I learned any of this stuff, I would have never been able to help a couple like this or give out information. So people reaching out to me like that for help is one of the number one reasons why I love and providing this type of information to you guys. So, to me, if we have something, or if we've been giving something to learn and that we can turn around and help and share with others, why keep it to ourselves? So in today's video, I'm going to break down how a syndication is structured. But before I do that, you may or may not be quite familiar with what exactly a syndication is. So let's define that. So what is a real estate syndication? A real estate syndication is just simply the pooling of funds from a group of investors in order to purchase a property that's going to be more expensive than any of them could have afforded on their own. So instead of buying several smaller commercial properties individually, this group of people can come together and buy a much larger asset. All right, so let's say, for instance, I've got $75,000 that I want to invest. Now, if I were an active real estate investor, I'd have to do a few things first. The first thing that I would have to do is set aside time to find good deals. The next thing that I would have to do is put it under contract. Then I would have to perform the inspections or line somebody up to perform the inspections. Then I would have to handle all financial matters. I would have to have people that could assist me in obtaining the loan for the property. And then I would make sure that it's leased out or stays rented out. And probably the worst part of the thing that I don't want to do the most with being an active investor is managing the property or dealing with tenants all the time. So I don't know about you, but trying to manage, this practice and still be a good husband and father to my kids, it takes up a lot of time. So being an active real estate investor for me at this point in my life, it's just not really feasible. And that's why I chose the passive route of investing instead. So investing in syndications allows you to put your money into larger properties without having to do all of this work yourself. So I can take that $75,000 and I can invest instead of an active investor as a passive investor instead. So my investment would be paired with, let's say, yours for 100,000 and somebody else's for 150,000 and somebody else's for 75,000, so on and so forth. And by all of us combining our resources together, we now have enough to not just buy a rental property, but again, something much larger like maybe a 1, 2, or 300 unit apartment complex. And what's great about being one of the passive individual investors, again, we don't have to do all of the day to day work of managing the property. So let's get into who is involved in the syndication setup, because there's mainly two people or two types of people, two basic roles in a syndication deal. And the first one is the sponsor or the GP or general partner. All right. And then, as you can imagine, they're the ones that have the most critical role in this investment process, because they're going to be the ones that do all these things that we just talked about. They're the ones that are actively pursuing properties, obtaining financing. They're trying to acquire the properties for you, and they either manage them themselves or they'll find a group to manage it for them. But not only does the sponsor invest their time, they're also investing their money. And typically this can range, I'd say the average is probably about 5 to 20% of total equity for the property. All right, so next is the investors, you and me, LP, the limited partners. And these are people that are passively investing in the deal. Great thing about this group is they have no active responsibilities at all in managing the asset. Now, there are all different types of syndications that you can invest in, from multifamily, self-storage, mobile home parks, land development, hotels, student housing, medical office buildings. The list goes on, but those are some of the more popular ones. And most of the syndications that I personally invest in and recommend to members of our passive investor circle are what are called value add multifamily deals. An example of this would be investing, let's say, in an apartment complex whose units are outdated. They haven't been updated in 15 or 20 years. Kitchens are outdated, countertops need to be redone, cabinets need to be refaced, carpets are worn out, the lighting needs to be changed. And by going in and making these different improvements, so you increase the improvements, you're able to turn around and you're able to increase the rent, which in turn increases the income, overall income, the net operating income in the property, and thus the overall value. All right. So if you're interested in starting to grow passive income streams with these types of deals, I've actually put together a free guide, passive income guide, and you can grab that over at debtfreedr.com/free guide. So the next thing that I want to do is move on, and we're going to discuss, I want to kind of draw out exactly how a syndication works. Now, the previous two groups that we talked about, remember, the general partners and the limited partners, they come together and they form the syndication. And remember that the GPs, they're the ones that are the active investors. They're the ones that they do all the work, and they're basically the landlord, but just on a much larger scale. And remember, the limited partners, those represent me and you, passive investors, no active responsibilities in managing the asset. And if you're a limited partner, really your only responsibility is just making sure that you have a check every quarter, whether you're getting a check or direct deposit. It's pretty nice. And the real estate syndication, it can only work when the GPs and the LPs, they actually come together. And then they come together as real estate professionals. The GPs, they find a good deal, they put together a great team. They need to execute on an intended business plan, because based on the business plan, they can figure out what the returns are going to be for you and me. And then the LPs, the limited partners, they are able to help out by investing their capital into the deal, which is going to make it possible for the general partners to actually acquire the property and fund those renovations that we just talked about. So together, the GP and the LPs come together and they join as an entity. And usually this entity is in the form of a limited liability company. And that entity holds the underlying asset. And because the LLC is what's called a pass-through entity, you're going to be able to get tax benefits of direct ownership. So this isn't like a timeshare. I mean, you're a direct owner into this property. And these tax benefits are great for the high income earner. And once the deal closes, the general partners actually work very closely with the property management team to, again, to make sure that the renovations are done correctly to improve the property, again, according to the business plan that was already created before the property was purchased. And then during this time period, the limited partners, you and me, we actually are going to get an ongoing supply of cash flow via distribution checks. And I, I'm not an accountant, but I've been doing this for several years. And if you do it right and you work with a good accountant, you can actually pay little to no tax on your distributions, because a lot of the depreciation can be taken on the properties and upfront it to help. So the passive depreciation, the passive losses will help offset your passive income, which is in the form of the distributions. Most of the deals that I'm currently in, it's typically about a 5 to 6 year hold period. So again, during that 5 or 6 years, that's when all the planned renovations are done and they're completed. And then once everything is done, the investors have been paid, then they're ready to turn around after that 5 or 6 year hold period and sell the property. And then once it's sold, the general partners, they actually return the limited partners their original investment capital, and then they split the profits. And typically, it depends on the deal, but it could be either a 70-30, or it could be sort of the average is an 80-20 split, where basically if it's an 80-20 split, so 80% of the profits go to the limited partner, and then 20% of the profits goes to the general partners. All right. So now that we've discussed what's involved with the real estate syndication, the structure, let's shift gears and let's talk about the investing part of it. Let's talk about the exact process if you are thinking about investing in a syndication. So I want to walk you through the basic steps. And once you've sat down, you've defined your goals, your investing goals, and you've found a sponsor that you like, you trust, you vetted them, and you want to invest with them. So I wanted to walk you through the steps that happen. Okay. So the first thing that's going to happen is the sponsor is going to announce the deal, that, whatever it is. Let's say this is an apartment in Dallas. Okay. So this deal is open, it's ready for funding, and they usually send it out, the deal offering, via an email. All right, next, what you're going to do is you're going to review the email. You're going to review the summary deck. That's the investment summary deck that they will send. It's almost like a PowerPoint slideshow of all the different things that they're planning on doing with the property, projected returns, the business plan, etc. And if you decide on investing, next, you would submit your offering. Typically, it's done via email, and you tell the sponsor how much you'd like to invest. Typically, there's a minimum involved. It used to be 50,000. Now these are creeping up into 75,000, sometimes $100,000 range. But each deal is different. So that will be disclosed in the summary deck. And occasionally, the sponsor will hold a live webinar. And if they don't hold a live one, typically they'll have one that's recorded. And you can actually get more information and check out some of the questions that were asked. A lot of times this webinar recording will be attached to the deal email. And after this is done, after the sponsor receives your offering, they'll actually send you a confirmation email confirming your spot in this limited liability company. And then from there, they'll send you a legal document called the Private Placement Memorandum, or PPM. And the way that I explain this to people, it's like if you've ever purchased a house before and you know how many papers that you have to sign during the closing, where they just keep putting papers out in front of you, sign here, sign here, sign here. It's basically like that. It's basically the legal description. If you want to read through all of it, you can. Most people don't, but legally, the sponsor should or is supposed to provide that for you. Now, after you sign the PPM, typically the wiring instructions will be in the email too, so you can wire your funds. There's some sponsors that will also allow you to send in a check as well. You will get an email confirmation that your funds have been received, and then after the everything is done with all the other limited partners, the sponsor is going to notify you that once the deal closes and lets you know what to expect next. And typically the deals that I'm in, they will give you access to an investor portal. You'll have a login, username, a password, and then from there you can see the deals that you're in. You can check and track your distributions. You can download your K1 tax files at typically around February or March each year. And basically, you would just take that, it's usually just one page, and you would send that to your accountant. That's pretty much all it is to it. And I will tell you this, after doing this for several years, these deals, they're almost always filled very quickly on a first come, first served basis. And as we're seeing more and more of these syndicators that are getting into the space left and right, it's really, honestly, it's making it harder and harder to find good deals because there's just so many people. Unfortunately, many of them don't know what they're doing, and that's bad for you, the investor. Typically, when I find a good deal, it's gone like that. It doesn't last long at all. And most of these, the ones that I've been involved with, they fill up in a day or two. Sometimes a little bit longer, sometimes less. We had a deal in February 2021. It became oversubscribed in about 2.5 hours. So if it's a really good deal and people are really wanting it, it's going to be gone. So you make sure that you stay on top of and you're constantly tracking. If you like a sponsor, what I do for my investors is I'll give them a heads up. I'll let them know as soon as I know from the sponsor that I'm investing with, I'll let them know the exact date and time that the investment is going to be coming out. So you'll be able to, if you have to transfer any money over to any accounts, or if just to be mentally prepared, instead of you waking up one morning and go, oh, by the way, here's a deal, and you weren't prepared for it. So that's what we do. One of the things that I do for those passive investor circle members. Again, if you're not a member, you can go to debtfreedr.com. Right on the homepage, it'll say join the passive investor circle. All right, last but not least, I want to go over why you should consider investing in these types of deals. And now that you know how the structure is set up, and now that you know the investment process, let's talk a little bit about what's in it for you. And there's actually a number of reasons that investors decide to invest in these types of deals, such as those that want to invest because their time is limited. So they'll invest in these things, to invest in real estate. It's very time consuming if you're an active investor, but if you invest in a syndication, it's perfect for people that their time is limited, such as yourself, and they're not interested in being a landlord, such as myself. They're interested in investing in physical assets, and they want some physical assets with the potential higher returns. They want to invest in something that has more stability than just putting all their money in the stock market. I'm not saying the stock market is bad. We personally still max out our practices retirement account. And then after that, any extra money goes towards these syndications. Before the syndications, we would still max out our retirement accounts and then the 529 plans for the kids. Then any extra money would go back into the stock market in taxable accounts, which I do not do that anymore. So I'd like to have some diversification. Another reason why you should consider investing in a syndication, again, we talked about the different tax benefits that you can get, especially that come with investing in real estate for the high income earner. Also, you are going to be able to receive cash flow and distributions. And again, if you work with a good accountant, this cash flow could potentially be tax-free or little to no tax because of the depreciation. And the cool thing is you can actually invest in money that you already have saved up in 401ks, IRAs, etc., with a self-directed IRA or self-directed 401k. So now that you know what a syndication is, it's really time to sit down. If you're married, sit down with your spouse and develop a goal to begin replacing your monthly personal expenses with passive income so that you can become financially free. If you're interested in learning more about this type of information, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button and the notification button. That way, anytime that I publish a new video, you'll be the first to know. Take care.